6 years ago, I did a video on the 416 Remington Magnum. And that video went kind of viral and received hundreds of thousands of views. But YouTube recently demonetized it. And I think they're going to keep it that way because I lost my appeal. So this video that you're watching right now is kind of a remake of that original classic video. But the 416 hunting cartridges are my favorite for dangerous game. The 416s hit noticeably harder than the 375s, but they shoot just as flat. And the recoil on the 416s, except for the Weatherby Magnum, really isn't a huge step up from the 375s in my opinion. And not only do the 416s bridge the gap between the 375s and the 458s, but in many ways they outperform both of them. If I had to pick one caliber for a safari that includes everything from plains game on up to elephant, it would definitely be the 416 is my first pick. All of the 416 hunting cartridges are fantastic. I have nothing bad to say about the 416 Rigby, the 416 Ruger, or even the 416 Weatherby. But this video is about my favorite 416 hunting cartridge, the 416 Remington Magnum. There was a huge resurgence of interest in safari hunting in the mid to late 1980s. This was due to several factors such as a great economy and average household income under the Reagan administration, and the huge popularity of Peter Capstick and his books and hunting videos that were released in 1986. At the same time, there was demand for a cartridge that hit harder than the 375 H&H, but had less recoil than the 458s. The 416 Rigby was pretty much a dead cartridge at that time, and there was really no access to brass or ammunition for the 416 Rigby. And the 416 Weatherby and the 416 Ruger didn't even exist yet. In 1988, Remington made the 416 caliber cartridge mainstream again by legitimizing the caliber with the new 416 Remington Magnum. The 416 Remington Magnum was based on the 416 Hoffman Wildcat that was popular among custom gun makers in the 70s and 1980s. The goal of the 416 Remington Magnum was to produce 416 Rigby ballistics in a cartridge that was similar in size to the 375 H&H Magnum. And this allowed the 416 Remington Magnum to be chambered in popular Remington 700 rifles. The 416 Remington Magnum was initially greeted with very positive reviews by most renowned hunters and riders at the time. Frank Barnes declared the 416 Remington Magnum as the best factory cartridge to be produced in decades. But soon, some problems developed. Squeezing all of that performance into a small case meant that the 416 Remington Magnum operated at higher pressures than the old 416 Rigby did. Initially, the only rifles chambered in the new 416 Remington Magnum were Remington 700 rifles. And Model 700 rifles were push feed designs that had those little tiny weak thumbnail extractors in them. And those extractors sometimes broke on heavy recoiling rifles and left the case stuck in the chamber. So Remington created a great modern dangerous game cartridge, but they chambered it in a rifle that was too weak to handle it. And this is an article written by George Hoffman. And
1990, I believe, and he's reviewing the new 416 Remington Magnum cartridge, and he really gloats about it. He loves the cartridge, but if you read the article, uh, he had actual problems with the Remington Model 700 that Remington's custom shop sent him. So, that's living proof that um, when this cartridge came out, it was a great cartridge, but the Remington 700 was the real problem.
Fortunately, other manufacturers and custom gun makers began chambering the 416 Remington Magnum in highly reliable controlled round feed actions, and the cartridge quickly gained a reputation as an excellent flat shooting killer. In order for Remington to save their reputation, Remington stopped producing factory production rifles in 416 Remington Magnum. You had to special order them at that point. So Winchester soon stepped up and started chambering their controlled round feed safari rifles in 416 Remington Magnum. And those Winchester rifles had absolutely zero issues. In the end, it's the Winchester Model 70 that carried the torch for this great cartridge rather than Remington, the company who created it. In fact, the 416 Remington Magnum was so impressive that Ruger and Weatherby eventually developed their own 416s to compete with it. The 416 Ruger and the 416 Weatherby, though, never really took off, and they really linger in obscurity today. Strangely and ironically, though, the 416 Remington Magnum cartridge renewed interest in the dead 416 Rigby cartridge. So today, the 416 Rigby is actually much more popular than the 416 Ruger or the 416 Weatherby. And the 416 Rigby owes its current popularity to the 416 Remington Magnum. But as of right now, the 416 Remington Magnum is the most widely used and most popular of all the 416 dangerous game cartridges. There are several reasons why the 416 Remington Magnum is the most practical and popular of all the 416 hunting cartridges. And I'll discuss those reasons in this segment. But first, let me clarify that I won't be discussing some of the obscure 416 Wildcats like the 416 Taylor, the 416 Hoffman, the 416 Rimmed, the 416 Dakota, cartridges like that, because they aren't practical or readily available. The ballistics of the original 416 Rigby are considered magical. The combination of ballistics, energy delivered, and acceptable recoil just strike a perfect balance for a do-it-all dangerous game or one-gun safari hunting cartridge. Sending a 400 grain bullet out of the muzzle at 2,400 feet per second is the perfect recipe for putting down big critters and also for hunting plains game without excessive recoil. The 416 Remington Magnum, though, was developed to match those perfect 416 Rigby ballistics, but to do it in a more efficient, regular size case that didn't require a custom extra large Magnum receiver. The 416 Rigby was designed to use old cordite propellant rather than modern smokeless powder. So the case is profoundly oversized and fat by today's standards. The 416 Remington Magnum does what the Rigby does, but it does it more efficiently, requires less powder, and utilizes a smaller action. As a result, ammunition for the 416 Remington is cheaper to buy, and if you reload your own, it's cheaper to reload. And more factory rifles are chambered in 416 Remington Magnum. Now let's compare the 416 Remington to the 416 Weatherby Magnum, this monster case right here. Most hunters see the added 200 to 300 feet per second increase in velocity of the 416 Weatherby as a complete waste when you're shooting a buffalo at 50 yards. And most experienced hunters think that all of that additional recoil isn't worth it. So the 416 Weatherby is kind of viewed as a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist. So today, the 416 Weatherby Magnum is almost a dead cartridge. There's not many people shooting it anymore. And for hunters that shoot buffalo and elephant at 50 yards and plains game at 100 yards, they really see no value in the 416 Weatherby Magnum. Now let's compare the Rem Mag to the 416 Ruger. The 416 Ruger is kind of another solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist. Ruger further condensed the 416 cartridge down in length by eliminating the belt and making the base diameter really fat. Even at this though, the cartridge does suffer from case capacity problems. And Hornady, which is the only manufacturer making ammo for this, uses a special secret blend of powders to achieve 416 Rem Mag velocities out of the 416 Ruger. But when you try to load the 416 Ruger yourself with a good temperature stable extruded powder, it's pretty much impossible to hit 416 Rigby or 416 Rem Mag velocities without severely compressing your load. And to add insult to injury, you're stuck using a Ruger M77 rifle, which isn't my favorite, if you want to shoot this cartridge, because that's the only rifle made chambered in it. And this is why I feel that the 416 Remington Magnum is a better cartridge or a more practical cartridge than the 416 Ruger. The 416 Ruger is honestly almost a dead cartridge today. Maybe you're going to find some on the shelf at the Cabela's in Anchorage, Alaska, but that's basically it. And to tell you the truth, it's not a bad cartridge at all. It's just an attempt to do something that was already done. And they Hornady and Ruger kind of made it a proprietary affair, and that caused it to be a flop. So the only real competition for the 416 Remington Magnum is the 416 Rigby. The 416 Rigby can be loaded to slightly higher velocities, but at the expense of a bigger case, a lot more powder, a bigger action, and larger ammunition expenses. The only real advantage I see to the 416 Rigby is nostalgia. Knowing that you're trudging through the Okavango Delta with the same cartridge that Harry Selby carried is a feeling that just can't be replicated with the 416 Remington Magnum. And I'll be the first to admit that. So the 416 Rigby definitely has the nostalgia advantage. But the fact that the 416 Remington Magnum has the same ballistics as the Rigby, it's cheaper and easier to load for, has more prolific factory ammunition availability, and has more rifles chambered in it, makes it the most practical 416 dangerous game cartridge in the world, in my opinion. Before I continue any further with this video, I need to dispel a myth about the 416 Remington Magnum. The 416 Rem Mag does not suffer from overpressure issues like a lot of people claim. Some armchair hunters started the myth about the 416 Rem Mag having these mythical high pressures that can't handle the blistering heat of Africa. But I'm here to tell you that that old rumor is complete and utter bullshit. First of all, even a very hot load of 416 Rem Mag operates at the same exact pressure as the 270 Winchester. That's right. Your really overpressure 416 Rem Mag has the same pressure as your dad and grandpa's old deer rifle shooting a 270 Winchester. Now, is the 270 Winchester famous for blowing up in hot weather? No, because guns that shoot it can handle the pressures. And that's just about any gun. And the same is true for the 416 Rem Mag. The initial problems with the 416 Remington Magnum were with Remington 700 rifles not being able to handle the recoil. There were no overpressure issues with this round. The 416 Rem Mag would break those tiny, weak fingernail extractors on Remington 700 rifles, just like they did when Remington came out with the 8mm Rem Mag, and just like they did when the Remington Ultra Mags came out. It's a rifle design problem, not a cartridge problem. Also, on the heat issue, that's really stupid, by the way. Places in Africa where we hunt dangerous game don't get any hotter than places in the United States get. I mean, in fact, most hunters visit Africa May through August when the weather is actually really cold in the morning and pleasant during the day. I mean, you want to hunt in heat, talk to California A-zone hunters or the people who hunt pronghorn in the Southwest. I mean, they hunt in heat. But to recap, the initial issues with the 416 Rem Mag were with crappy Remington 700 rifles that they were initially chambered in. African PHs and hunting experts like Kevin Robertson don't like the Remington 700 because of that weak extractor issue. When Winchester and Ruger started chambering their safari rifles in 416 Rem Mag, the problem magically went away. So I assure you, the 416 Remington Magnum is a perfectly safe cartridge to shoot and to reload for. All of the 416 caliber dangerous game cartridges are famous for giving fantastic penetration. In my experience, a 400 grain 416 caliber bullet will usually outpenetrate a similar 500 grain 458 bullet, even though the 458 bullets have better sectional density. If you watched my video titled Hunting Bullet Penetration, you'll see that sectional density doesn't tell the whole story with penetration. The extra velocity and smaller frontal area of the 416s usually overtake the 458s when it comes to driving deep into a buffalo or an elephant. Twist rate of your barrel also plays an important role here. And if you have a standard 1 in 14 twist barrel on your Rem Mag, you have to be careful with really long solid copper bullets that might not fully stabilize, because full stabilization is very important for penetration. And here's a breakdown of an elephant I shot this year with a 400 grain flat nose solid out of my 416 Remington Magnum. I took a heart shot and a follow-up hip shot on that elephant, and both bullets passed directly through the entire elephant.
So I was expecting the heart lung shot I took on this elephant. I was expecting that 400 grain solid to zip right through it, and it did. There was no bullet recovered there. But the most incredible thing was that follow-up shot I made immediately. As the elephant turned, I hit it with a hip shot offhand. That shot actually went all the way through the elephant, went through the lungs, crashed through the front of the ribs, and exited the elephant on the other side. So there's no bullets to recover from this elephant, and I'm just impressed every time at how well 416 penetrates. Just amazing. You can see my shot went straight through the heart. And that's probably the entrance right there and the exit. Perfect heart shot. That's an exit hole right there. I actually shot it with that flat nose solid in the back hip, and it penetrated all the way through the body and exited out the front of the middle of the body. Crazy penetration. That's why I like the 416s. They're just penetrating machines.
Out of all the hundreds of rifles that I have in my collection, only one of them actually has a name. Winnie is a Model 70 Safari Express chambered in 416 Remington Magnum. She's been doing my heavy lifting in Africa for a long time now, and Winnie has never let me down, not once. She was my first 416 Remington Magnum rifle, and she'll probably never be replaced. The 416 Rem Mag is my perfect one-gun safari cartridge when dangerous game is involved in the hunt. I typically load 400 grainers for dangerous game and some 350 grainers for plains game. After my first 3 safaris that Winnie went on, I actually sold my Heim 88 double rifle, and I only use this now. A scoped 416 is the perfect client rifle for dangerous game. To me, the recoil isn't bad at all, but I don't let big rifles beat me up. I do all of my load development and zeroing from a lead sled, and I don't add any weight to my lead sled. And I do all of my practice either off of shooting sticks or offhand. So recoil isn't really an issue for me while I even practice with this rifle. And for many years, Winnie was just a plain Jane off-the-shelf factory Safari Express that I didn't do anything to it. But if you saw my video earlier this year called Safari Rifle Makeover, Winnie got a little bit of a makeover. I find the 416 Remington Magnum to be one of the most accurate and easy to load for of all the dangerous game cartridges. Using quality brass and the right powder charge, I can shoot under 1 MOA without even trying. The 416 Remington Magnum actually has a well-deserved reputation for being an inherently accurate cartridge, especially if you load your own ammunition. Although I've safely loaded 400 grain loads up to 2,500 feet per second before, I try to keep my loads at or maybe just below 2,400 feet per second. A 400 grain load with a muzzle velocity of 2,400 feet per second keeps the muzzle energy at about 5,200 foot-pounds. And at that 5,200 foot-pounds, I feel like the recoil is also very manageable. So I try to stay around there. And also, don't discount the 350 grain bullets for the 416 Rem Mag. They still deliver over 5,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, but they shoot extremely flat and they have noticeably softer recoil. And remember, the main goal of my loads for dangerous game aren't precision, it's reliability and safety. So for powder, I prefer very temperature stable extruded powders like the Hodgdon Extreme line of powders. And I want about, I don't know, 90 to 95% case fill without going over pressure. That's what I usually shoot for. And I found nothing better for the 416 Rem Mag than H4895 and Varget powder. They're very common powders. They're clean and they're extremely temperature stable. And remember, fire formed brass will have slightly better case capacity than virgin brass will. So the load development process doesn't really start until you get to your first batch of fired cases. Using good brass, a premium bullet, a good Magnum primer, and a good reloading technique, and you can make really kick-ass loads for the 416 Rem Mag. Also, be mindful that you're loading full power, big bore, dangerous game loads here. And this is really no place to push limits, take risks, or cut corners during the reloading process. So no extremely compressed loads or copying some idiot's load data off the internet. You also need to prep your cases for these dangerous game loads more carefully than you would for other loads. And you should always full length resize your brass for this cartridge and keep your number of firings to a minimum with ammo that you're actually going to take to Africa and use for hunting. Before I load a case, especially fired cases, I visually inspect every brass case for problems, and I never hunt with brass that's been fired more than about 4 times. And after 4 firings, it usually becomes practice brass only. Also, you need to trim your brass to the exact length so your crimp turns out right every time. You'll be putting a good crimp on these cartridges to prevent the bullet from moving under recoil in the magazine and for pulling out while you pull ammo out of your ammo belt and just general mishandling. You need a good crimp on that. And I highly recommend that you use a Lee factory crimp die, and crimp is a separate step. And because you'll be loading heavy flat-based bullets, you'll need to put a good chamfer in the neck so the bullet seats without bulging the neck walls on the case. And you need to use a VLD style chamfer when you put a chamfer in these cases. Next, let's talk about bullet seating depth. Don't chase the lands with dangerous game ammo like you would with precision ammo. With these rounds, you're going to seat the bullet so you could put a crimp right in the middle of the cantilever or the driving band. So don't worry about bullet jump with these loads. You're not making long distance precision ammunition here. You're making ammunition so it will feed reliably and hold together under heavy recoil in bad conditions. Like I stated before, you need a good heavy crimp when you load this ammunition, but you can't crimp it too heavy because you don't want to distort the bullet or create an overpressure situation with an overcrimped bullet. The Lee factory crimp die is the best and arguably the only way to crimp a dangerous game cartridge at home. Don't use the roll crimp feature on your seating die. Always use a Lee factory crimp die when you load your 416 Rem Mag. The Lee crimp die gives you maximum control over your crimp, and it's the most consistent crimping method that I've ever seen. But remember, your crimp is only as consistent as your brass sizing and trim length is. So pay attention to your brass prep. And lastly, always, and I mean always, inspect and weigh every piece of dangerous game ammunition before placing it in your ammo case. By weighing each loaded case, you can immediately spot a piece of ammunition that isn't right and you can remove it from inventory. This step saves hunts and lives. And now, kind of a disclaimer here, only experienced reloaders should be loading dangerous game ammunition or the 416 Remington Magnum. Loading this cartridge is not for beginners. If you have questions about reloading, you shouldn't be loading the 416 Rem Mag. I know, I'm going to end up quoting that line in the comment section below. The 416 Remington Magnum has a stellar reputation in Africa. If you show up for a dangerous game hunt with a controlled round feed scoped rifle chambered in 416 Remington Magnum, your PH will be very happy with your selection. The 416 signifies that you brought a rifle with enough power to easily drop an elephant, but you can also shoot with pinpoint accuracy when it's required. And that's what your PH really wants. The only thing that matters to you as the client is to make a perfect first shot. And the 416 Rem Mag allows that. Over the last 37 years, the 416 Rem Mag has become very prolific in Africa. The last 3 PHs that I hunted with owned 416 Rem Mag rifles, and they used them as their backup or client loaner rifles. The 416 Rem Mag ammunition is actually available at gun stores in Africa, even in Zimbabwe. And I've been told that 416 Rem Mag ammo is even easier to get than 416 Rigby is over there right now. The 416s truly are the best dangerous game cartridges for a client to make that perfect critical first shot. But you don't have to believe me. Here's what some actual PHs think of the 416s.
I'm the apprentice for Dalton York Safaris, and I've been working with them for a little while now, and I'm on my way to getting my professional hunter's license. I'm using a 416 Remington Winchester Model 70, and I bought it a few years back when I started my apprenticeship, and so far it's done me very well.
What would you suggest as a gun caliber to bring for Cape Buffalo?
375 or 460. You come on a buffalo safari, the ideal, everybody always, you want to shoot the buffalo on the shoulder or just behind the shoulder. They don't always stand broadside.
Sure.
And that is a key factor, if you want to call it a factor, that a hunter needs to look at. So that animal a lot of them would be quartering towards you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to take a quartering away shot, but
right.
that does happen, but broadside quartering towards you from whichever angle. And then the frontal, the 416 does better.
Okay.
The frontal, personally, with the 375, I won't let a client take a frontal with a 375.
Okay.
Unless it's extremely close, but still, it's just not worth it. 416, you can do it.
416, it's one of the greats.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think the advantage of the 416 over the 375, from a professional hunter's point of view, it definitely numbs those big buffalo bulls a bit more than a 375.
Yeah.
When that 400 grain bullet hits them, you can see the effect. As far as stopping a charge, I think at times nothing's ever big enough.
True.
But many of the best professional hunters throughout Africa use a 416.
Absolutely.
And that wouldn't be the case if it didn't stop a charge on buffalo adequately.
Like the Rigby before it, the 416 Remington Magnum has that magic formula of sending a 400 grain bullet at 2,400 feet per second. And that strikes the perfect balance between trajectory, energy, and low recoil. It's been hammering dangerous game from Alaska to Zimbabwe for almost 40 years with no breaks in the action, and has proven to be reliable and effective in good rifles. I'll admit it, it's not as cool or nostalgic as the 416 Rigby is, but because of its availability and efficiency, the 416 Remington Magnum is currently a more practical cartridge than the Rigby. I've killed everything from elephants to 15 or 20 pound antelopes with my 416 Rem Mag, and it's never let me down. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and review of a truly great cartridge. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.